I stood frozen in the center of my living room, surrounded by untouched platters of food and unopened bottles of wine. The house was dead silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. My phone pinged with another notification, and I reluctantly looked down at the screen. There they were, all smiling around my sister Abby, posing next to her gleaming new car. My entire family, who had all told me they were too busy to come to my housewarming party. Tears streamed down my face as my phone suddenly rang, making me jump. It was my father, his voice urgent and stern. "We need to talk. Now." Before I could respond, headlights swept across my living room wall. A car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A complete stranger walked toward my front door with determined steps and a folder in hand. I quickly wiped away my tears and composed myself before opening the door. The stranger was a middle-aged man in a crisp suit, looking far too formal for a Saturday evening in my quiet suburban neighborhood. "Dina Williams?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "Yes, that's me," I replied cautiously. "Frank Miller." He extended his hand. "I represent Hillside Properties. I'm afraid we need to discuss an urgent matter regarding your property lines." I reluctantly invited him in, acutely aware of the party decorations that now seemed to mock me. The welcome home banner hung limply over the dining table, laden with untouched food. "I was expecting company, but they couldn't make it," I explained, feeling pathetic for even mentioning it. Frank barely acknowledged my comment, instead pulling out documents from his folder. "There's been a significant oversight regarding your property boundaries. According to our records, approximately half of your backyard legally belongs to the adjacent property owned by Hillside Properties." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's impossible. I just closed on this house 3 weeks ago. The survey was clear." "I'm afraid the survey was incorrect. We have documents dating back to 1972 that clearly indicate the boundary line runs through what you believe is your backyard. This house had been my dream for 10 years. 10 years of double shifts as a pediatric nurse, of saying no to vacations my friends invited me on, of putting every spare dollar into my house fund. 10 years of living in a tiny apartment while watching my younger sister Abby get everything handed to her on a silver platter. I had found this craftsman-style home with its character-filled corners and potential, and it represented everything I'd worked for. It needed work, but that was part of the appeal. I could make it mine, truly mine, without my family's input or control. My family. The same family that couldn't be bothered to attend my housewarming, but were all gathered around Abby's new car right now. I thought about the careful way I had planned this party, choosing my mom's favorite wine and my dad's preferred beer, making Abby's favorite appetizers. I had even set up the spare bedroom with an air mattress in case anyone wanted to stay over. All for nothing. This morning I had received a casual text from my mom. "Something came up with Abby. We'll try to stop by later." But they never did. And now I was learning that my dream home had a serious property dispute. I tried calling my realtor Jennifer, but it went straight to voicemail. As I left a frantic message, I pulled up the property documents on my laptop, scanning for anything related to the boundary lines Frank was claiming were incorrect. "This will significantly impact your property value," Frank continued. "And, of course, any plans you might have had for that space would need to be reconsidered." That space was where I planned to create the garden I'd always wanted. A place of my own where I could grow vegetables and flowers, something I couldn't do in an apartment. Another dream potentially crushed. "I need to speak with my attorney," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. Frank nodded, handing me his business card. "Of course. But Hillside Properties is prepared to offer a reasonable solution. We'd be willing to purchase the property from you at market value, saving you the headache of dealing with boundary disputes and the structural issues." "What structural issues?" I demanded, my heart sinking further. "The previous owners abandoned an insurance claim regarding foundation problems. I assumed you knew." His surprise seemed manufactured, practiced. "It's all in the disclosure documents." I was certain it wasn't. I had read every page of those documents multiple times. As Frank was leaving, my phone rang again. "Dad." This time I answered. "Dina, we need to talk about Abby," he said without preamble. "Dad, I'm dealing with something serious right now with the house," I tried to explain. "This is serious too," he interrupted. "The thing is, Abby's having trouble with the payments on her new car. We co-signed for her, but she's got some other expenses coming up and, well, we were thinking since you have that big new house with extra bedrooms, maybe she could stay with you for a while. just until she gets back on her feet. Financially. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not even an apology for missing my housewarming. Just another request to help Abby. Again. You want her to move into the house. None of you bothered to visit today. The words came out sharper than I intended. Don't be dramatic, Dina. We had a prior commitment with Abby. You know how excited she was about that car. We couldn't let her down. But letting me down was apparently fine, as it had been my entire life. After my father hung up, I sat on my newly purchased couch in stunned silence. My phone kept lighting up with notifications. More pictures from the impromptu celebration for Abby's car purchase. Mom captioned one, "So proud of our baby girl's first luxury car." I scrolled through the images, a familiar hollowness expanding in my chest. There they all were, Mom and Dad beaming my aunts and uncles who had all claimed to have prior commitments when I invited them to my housewarming, even my cousins who had said they were too busy. All gathered around a car, as if it were a newborn baby. The car I noticed was a brand new luxury SUV that must have cost at least $50,000, and now Abby couldn't make the payments. Of course she couldn't. It reminded me of when my parents' small business hit a rough patch during Abby's second year of college. They had called me in tears, worried they'd have to tell Abby to take a semester off. Without hesitation, I had withdrawn $8,000 from my house fund to cover her tuition. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Family helps family. But now, looking at these pictures, I wondered if I was really part of this family at all. I walked through my half-empty house, trying to calm my racing thoughts about both the property dispute and my family's rejection. The house was supposed to represent my independence, my success, despite growing up in the shadow of my sister, the golden child. Now it felt like just another problem. I went down to the basement to check for any obvious foundation issues Frank had mentioned. With my phone flashlight, I examined the walls looking for cracks or signs of water damage. In the far corner, I noticed a hairline crack running from floor to ceiling. Was that normal settling or something more sinister? I took photos to send to a contractor. When I came back upstairs, my phone rang again. Not my father this time, but my friend Tara. "Hey, where are you? I thought your party started at 4, she asked. I had completely forgotten I'd invited Tara. She wasn't just a friend, but a coworker from the pediatric unit where I worked. "I'm home," I said, my voice cracking. But nobody else showed up. "What? Nobody? Not even your parents?" They went to see Abby's new car instead. Tara didn't respond immediately, but I heard her car start in the background. "I'm coming over, and I'm bringing wine and pizza." While waiting for Tara, I tried calling my realtor Jennifer again. This time she answered, sounding distracted. "Jennifer, someone just came to my door claiming half my property belongs to a development company. He mentioned foundation issues that weren't in the disclosure." "What? Who came to your door?" She sounded genuinely surprised, but also defensive. "Frank Miller from Hillside Properties." "I've never heard of him or that company. Did you sign anything?" "No, of course not," I said, relieved I had at least done something right. "Good. Don't sign anything. I'll look into this first thing Monday morning." She hung up quickly, too quickly for my comfort. I tried to remember who had recommended Jennifer to me. It might have been the seller's brother now that I thought about it. That connection suddenly seemed suspicious. Tara arrived 30 minutes later with a large pizza and 2 bottles of wine. She gave me a long hug at the door. "Your place is gorgeous," she said, looking around at my carefully chosen furniture and paint colors. "I can't believe nobody showed up." We sat at my dining table, pushing aside the untouched party platters to make room for the pizza box. "So, what's this about a property dispute?" Tara asked, after I told her about Frank's visit. I explained everything, including my suspicions about Jennifer the realtor. "That sounds shady as hell," Tara agreed. "My cousin bought a house last year and had something similar happen. Turned out it was a scam to get her to sell cheap to developers." "Really?" A small hope flickered. "Yeah, but listen about your family." Tara hesitated, swirling her wine. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but Abby deliberately scheduled her car reveal to coincide with your housewarming." "How do you know that?" "My sister's friend works at the dealership. She overheard Abby specifically ask if she could take delivery today because she wanted to, quote, show up her sister's boring house party." The pizza turned to ash in my mouth. I had suspected something like this, but hearing confirmation hurt more than I expected. As the evening wore on, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with increasing anger. Dina, your father is very upset about your attitude. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about us missing your little get-together. You know how important it was for us to support Abby today. She's been talking about this car for months. You've always been so difficult, always wanting attention at the wrong times. Call us when you're ready to apologize. Tara's eyes widened as she heard the message play on speakerphone. Are you serious? They want you to apologize. I nodded, too numb to speak. After Tara left, I wandered through my house feeling utterly alone. I had bought this place believing it would be a fresh start, a sanctuary. Instead, it felt like I had inherited a bundle of problems, both structural and emotional. In the built-in bookcase of the living room, I noticed something odd. One of the shelves didn't quite fit with the others. I pushed on it, and to my surprise, it moved slightly. Behind it was a small compartment containing a leather-bound journal. Inside, in neat handwriting, the previous owner had documented every problem with the house, complete with dates and the names of contractors who had done substandard work. Even more shocking, there were notes about bribing the inspector to overlook issues. This wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate fraud. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose fueled by anger. The journal I'd discovered was like finding a smoking gun. I spent the early hours photographing every page, creating a digital record of the evidence. Then I made 2 phone calls, one to a real estate attorney recommended by Tara, and another to a structural engineer to assess the foundation issues. The attorney, Julia Barnes, agreed to see me that afternoon. While waiting for the appointment, I spent time researching Frank Miller and Hillside Properties online. I found nothing about Frank, but Hillside appeared to be a relatively new development company, with very little information available. Their website showed several upcoming projects, but no completed ones. I also looked up the previous owner of my house, Scott Turner. His social media revealed he was now selling other flipped homes in the area, all with the same quick turnaround time as mine had been. In his photos, I recognized my home inspector laughing with him at what appeared to be a barbecue. That connection confirmed my suspicions about the inspection being compromised. At Julia's office, I laid out everything: Frank's unexpected visit, the property dispute claim, the hidden journal, and the connections I'd uncovered. This is quite a case, Julia said, reviewing the journal. If what's documented here is true, you have grounds for serious legal action against multiple parties. What about the property line dispute? Let me investigate that first. It sounds suspicious, especially coming from a company with no established record. Often developers use intimidation tactics to get new homeowners to sell below market value. They count on you being overwhelmed and uninformed. I left her office feeling slightly better. At least I had a plan of action now. But when I pulled into my driveway, my momentary relief vanished. My parents' car was parked in front of my house, along with Abby's new SUV. They hadn't called or texted to say they were coming. I took a deep breath and walked inside to find my mother arranging flowers in my kitchen like she owned the place, while my father sat on my couch watching TV. Abby was nowhere in sight. There you are, Mom said brightly, as if yesterday never happened. We decided to surprise you with a proper visit since we missed your party. Before I could respond, Abby emerged from my hallway with a measuring tape in hand. This bedroom will work, but the closet is smaller than mine at home, she announced, not even acknowledging me. What exactly is going on here? I demanded, setting down my purse. Well, since you weren't answering our calls, we thought we'd come over and work things out in person, Dad explained, finally turning off the TV. Abby needs a place to stay for a while, and you have all this extra space. I've already measured the guest room, Abby added. My bed won't fit, so I'll need yours. You can take the smaller room. I stood there in disbelief. You all skipped my housewarming to celebrate Abby's car purchase, which she apparently can't afford, and now you expect me to give her my bedroom in my house that I bought without any help from any of you. Don't be selfish, Dina, my mother scolded. Abby is going through a difficult time. Difficult time. She just bought a luxury car. Which was a mistake, Dad interjected. We all make mistakes. She needs family support right now. Where was my family support yesterday? I asked quietly. Where was it when I graduated nursing school, or when I got promoted to charge nurse, or when I spent 10 years saving for this house while helping put Abby through college? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "You've always been the strong one," Dina Mom finally said. "You've never needed our help. Abby's different. She's more sensitive." "More important, you mean," I corrected. Abby, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "You think it's easy being your sister perfect Dina, who never needs help, who does everything right the first time. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow?" I laughed a sharp sound without humor. "My shadow? Are you kidding me? My entire life I've watched you get everything handed to you while I worked for every single thing I have." "That's because you push people away. You're so determined to prove you can do everything yourself that no one can get close to you," Abby shot back. "I pushed people away. Mom and Dad missed my college graduation because you had a dance recital. They skipped my nursing school pinning ceremony because you had finals week stress. Every milestone in my life has taken a backseat to whatever was happening in yours." My parents looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances. "We never meant to make you feel less important," Dad said softly. "But you did. You do. And now you're in my house that none of you cared enough to visit yesterday, asking me to give up my bedroom to Abby because she made yet another irresponsible decision." "We thought you'd want to help your sister, Mom," said her voice, taking on the guilt-inducing tone I knew too well. "I've been helping her my entire life. I helped pay her tuition when your business struggled. I've loaned her money countless times that she never repaid. I'm done." "So, you won't help, Dad?" asked, his expression hardening. "No. Abby needs to sell that car she can't afford and find an apartment within her budget. I'm not subsidizing her bad decisions anymore." My family left in anger, Abby slamming the door behind her. The house felt empty again, but somehow less lonely than when they had been in it. I sat down on my couch, emotionally drained but oddly relieved. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my family. My phone rang. It was Julia Barnes. "Dina, I've found something interesting about your property dispute. There is no record of Hillside Properties owning any adjacent land to yours. In fact, the property lines in your deed match exactly with county records. I think Mr. Miller was trying to scam you." "Are you serious?" "Very. And there's more. Frank Miller isn't a registered real estate agent or attorney. He appears to work for a property development company that's been targeting new homeowners in your neighborhood with similar tactics. They're trying to scare people into selling below market value so they can build multifamily units." I felt a surge of anger mixed with relief. "So my property line is actually correct?" "Yes. You own exactly what your deed says you own. At least one crisis was fake. But the foundation issues documented in the journal were very real, as were the family issues that had come to a head today. Still, for the first time since moving in, I felt like I might actually be able to handle it all." The next week was a blur of activity as I began fighting back on multiple fronts. I filed formal complaints against the home inspector and Jennifer the realtor with the state licensing board. Julia helped me draft a cease and desist letter to Frank Miller and Hillside Properties, warning them against further fraudulent claims about my property. I also scheduled contractors to assess the foundation issues and other problems documented in the previous owner's journal. The quotes for repairs were substantial, ranging from $15,000 to $25,000, but at least I now had a clear picture of what needed to be fixed. During my days off from the hospital, I learned basic home repair skills from online videos. I couldn't afford to hire professionals for everything, so I tackled smaller projects myself, patching drywall, fixing leaky faucets, repairing broken tiles. Each completed task gave me a sense of ownership and accomplishment that counteracted the disappointment of my family situation. I also began meeting my neighbors, something I hadn't done before the housewarming disaster. The couple next door, Sam and Lisa Jackson, had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and provided valuable insight into the area's history. "That development company has been causing trouble for about 6 months now," Sam told me over coffee in his kitchen. "They tried the same property line scam on the Millers down the street and the new couple on Oak Avenue." "Have they succeeded with anyone?" I asked. "Unfortunately, yes. The elderly woman at the corner sold to them for well below market value because they convinced her there were serious code violations that would cost a fortune to fix. We found out later there were no violations at all." I shared what I had learned with other neighbors, warning them about Frank Miller's tactics. Together, we formed an informal neighborhood watch, agreeing to alert each other if anyone from Hillside Properties approached our homes. Meanwhile, my family situation deteriorated further. My parents left increasingly guilt-laden voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart by refusing to help Abby. I stopped answering their calls after a while, focusing instead on rebuilding my life and home. Tara suggested I try therapy to deal with the family drama, and after initial resistance, I made an appointment with a counselor named Dr. Rivera. In our first session, I broke down while describing the pattern of favoritism that had defined my childhood. "It sounds like you've been the family scapegoat, while your sister has been the golden child," Dr. Rivera observed. "These are common roles in dysfunctional families. But why me? What did I do wrong?" I asked through tears. "Nothing. These roles aren't based on anything you did or didn't do. They're about the parent's own unresolved issues and needs. The question now is, how do you want to redefine your relationships moving forward?" It was a question I had never considered. I had always accepted my role as the responsible one, the one who didn't need help, the one who could be counted on to solve problems. Now I was learning to set boundaries and prioritize my own needs. One evening, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my grandmother, my father's mother, whom I hadn't spoken to in months. "Dina, it's Grandma Eleanor. I heard about what happened with your housewarming and wanted to check on you." Her voice brought immediate comfort. Grandma Eleanor had always treated me with special affection, though she lived in Florida and we rarely saw her. "I'm okay, Grandma. Just dealing with some house issues and family drama. Your father told me you refused to help Abby with her car payments or let her move in. He seemed to think I would be disappointed in you." I braced myself for the criticism I expected would follow. "But I'm not," she continued, surprising me. "I told him he should be ashamed of asking you for more when they couldn't even bother to attend your housewarming." Relief flooded through me. "You did." "Of course I did. You know, this reminds me of my own family growing up. I was the eldest of 4, and my parents always expected me to be the responsible one, while they coddled my siblings, especially my brother Robert. Your grandfather was the same with your father and your Aunt Linda." I didn't know that I said, realizing how little I knew about my grandmother's past. "It's a pattern that repeats itself through generations unless someone breaks it," Grandma said. "I tried to be different with your father and Linda, but old habits die hard, I suppose. Now he's doing the same thing to you that was done to me." Her words hit me like a revelation. The pattern of favoritism in my family wasn't just about me and Abby. It was a generational cycle that had affected my grandmother and likely generations before her. "How did you deal with it?" I asked. "Not well at first. I cut ties with my parents for several years in my 20s. Eventually we reconciled, but on different terms. I set boundaries they had to respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. After talking to my grandmother, I felt less alone in my struggle. I also felt a renewed determination to break the unhealthy patterns in my family, not just for my sake, but for future generations." The next day, Julia called with news that changed everything. "Dina, I've been investigating Frank Miller further, and I've made a disturbing discovery. He doesn't just work for Hillside Properties. He's connected to the company that sold you your house. In fact, the previous owner, Scott Turner, is his brother-in-law." "What are you saying? They deliberately sold me a house with problems?" "It appears so. They've done this before. They buy homes, make cosmetic repairs to hide structural issues, then sell them at inflated prices. When the new owners discover the problems, Hillside approaches them with lowball offers to take the problem off their hands. It's a coordinated scam." I felt a rush of anger, but also validation. My suspicions had been correct. "What can we do about it?" "We have enough evidence for a strong legal case. The journal you found is particularly damning. But there's something else you should know. The local news has been investigating real estate fraud in the area. They might be interested in your story." The prospect of going public made me hesitate. On one hand, it could expose the scammers and help other potential victims. On the other hand, it would mean putting my personal business, including my family issues, in the spotlight. Before I could decide, I received another unexpected visitor. Abby was standing on my porch when I returned from work, her eyes red from crying, no luxury SUV in sight. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I let her in, noticing immediately that something was different. She seemed smaller, somehow less entitled. "I sold the car," she said, sitting on my couch. "You were right. I couldn't afford it." "I'm sorry it didn't work out," I said cautiously. "No, I'm the one who's sorry." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been awful to you, Dina. Not just about the car or the housewarming, but for years." Her admission surprised me. "What's going on, Abby?" She took a deep breath. "Mom and Dad's business is failing. They've been using my credit for loans because theirs is maxed out. The car was their idea, a way to make it look like everything was fine. The revelation stunned me. Their business is failing. Why didn't they tell me?" "Because you're the successful one. The one who has it all together. They didn't want you to know they were struggling." I shook my head in disbelief. "So all the times they've helped you financially were actually them using me as a front for their financial problems. They co-signed the car loan, but they can't make the payments either. It was all for show." The pieces began falling into place. My parents' insistence that Abby move in with me wasn't just about enabling her, it was about solving their own financial crisis by removing one dependent from their household. "Why are you telling me this now?" Abby looked down. "Because I'm tired of being used. And because despite everything, you're the only person in our family who's ever been honest with me." I felt torn between compassion for my sister, who was clearly also a victim in some ways, and self-protection after years of being taken advantage of. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was the local news station, somehow already aware of my situation with the fraudulent home sale and the development company's tactics. "Miss Williams, we're investigating real estate fraud in your area. Would you be willing to share your story on camera?" I looked at Abby, considering the implications. By speaking out, I would not only expose the scammers, but potentially my family's financial troubles as well. The reporter was still waiting for my answer. "I need some time to consider your request," I told the reporter. "Can I call you back tomorrow?" After hanging up, I explained the situation to Abby, including the housing scam, the journal I'd found, and now the possibility of going public with my story. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet. Speaking out could help other potential victims, but it would also put our family in the spotlight." Abby nodded slowly. "You know, a year ago I would have begged you not to do it to protect the family image at all costs. But now I think you should tell your story. Mom and Dad have been maintaining appearances at everyone else's expense for too long." Her support surprised me. Maybe she really was changing. "I need to think about it," I said. "But thank you for being honest with me about Mom and Dad's business." After Abby left, I called Julia to discuss my options. We agreed that regardless of whether I went public, we had a strong legal case against the seller, the inspector, and Hillside Properties. She filed initial paperwork the next day, officially beginning the legal process. Meanwhile, I continued my DIY home repairs with renewed determination. I installed a security system partly because of concerns about Hillside Properties' intimidation tactics, and partly to regain a sense of control over my home. I painted rooms, replaced light fixtures, and slowly transformed the house into the safe haven I had always envisioned. My neighborhood allies proved invaluable during this time. Lisa from next door brought over homemade meals when I was too exhausted from work and house repairs to cook. Sam helped me install a new kitchen faucet. Another neighbor, Tom Carter, was a retired contractor who volunteered advice on prioritizing repairs and even helped me patch the most concerning foundation cracks while I waited for the legal process to unfold. "You know this house has good bones," Tom said as we worked in the basement. "Don't let those scammers make you think otherwise. With the right care, it'll stand for another 100 years. His words reinforced what I was beginning to feel. Despite its problems, this was my home and I was going to fight for it. The fight intensified when Hillside Properties escalated their intimidation tactics. One morning, I found tire tracks across my front lawn. Another day, workers accidentally damaged my mailbox while supposedly doing road maintenance. None of these incidents could be directly traced back to the development company, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. Julia advised me to document everything and install security cameras, which I did. The cameras captured footage of a man examining my property line markers late one night. When I showed the footage to Sam, he immediately recognized the trespasser. "That's Frank Miller's assistant. I've seen him with Frank at community meetings." The evidence of ongoing harassment strengthened our legal case, but also increased my anxiety. I began to wonder if fighting was worth it, or if I should cut my losses and sell the house. During a particularly low moment, I called Grandma Eleanor. "I'm so tired of fighting, Grandma," I admitted. "Sometimes I think it would be easier to just walk away." "It would be easier," she agreed. "But then they win. And not just the scammers, but everyone who's ever underestimated you or taken you for granted." "Is that reason enough to keep going, Pride?" "It's not about pride, Dina. It's about justice. It's about standing up for what's right, not just for yourself, but for others who might face the same situation." Her words reminded me of why I became a nurse in the first place, to advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves, to make a difference in people's lives. This fight was an extension of that same principle. The next day, I called the news reporter back and agreed to an interview with one condition. The focus would remain on the real estate fraud, not my family drama. The interview took place in my living room, the same space where I had stood alone during my failed housewarming party. I showed the reporter the journal documenting the fraud, explained the intimidation tactics, and outlined how my case connected to a larger pattern of real estate scams in the area. "What made you decide to speak out?" the reporter asked. "I thought about my grandmother's words about justice and standing up for what's right, because if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. People need to know what to watch out for, and those responsible need to be held accountable." The story aired 3 days later. By the next morning, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from other homeowners who had experienced similar issues, attorneys offering services and local officials promising investigations. The exposure created exactly the pressure I had hoped for. Hillside Properties attorney contacted Julia the same day the story aired, suddenly eager to discuss a settlement. The State Real Estate Commission launched an investigation into the inspector and Jennifer the realtor. Scott Turner, the previous owner, deleted his social media accounts and reportedly left town. In the midst of this whirlwind, my parents showed up unannounced again. This time they looked subdued, even embarrassed. "We saw you on the news," Dad said when I opened the door. "You could have called first," I pointed out, not inviting them in immediately. "We weren't sure you'd answer," Mom admitted. "You haven't been taking our calls." Because every conversation was about how I was failing Abby by not letting her move in. Nothing about how you all failed me by skipping my housewarming. They exchanged glances. "We know we've made mistakes," Dad said. "Abby told us she talked to you about our business problems." "She did." "Why didn't you come to me directly?" "Because we were ashamed," Mom said quietly. "And because we've always leaned on you too much. It wasn't fair to ask for more." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from them. I stepped aside and let them enter, not quite ready to forgive, but willing to listen. Our conversation was difficult but necessary. They acknowledged the pattern of favoritism toward Abby, admitting it stemmed partly from their own upbringings, and partly from the fact that I had always seemed so capable. "We took your strength for granted," Dad said. "We assumed you didn't need us the way Abby did." "Everyone needs support," I told them. "Even strong people." We didn't resolve everything in one conversation, but it was a start. They left with a better understanding of my boundaries and a tentative plan to seek family counseling together. The following week, Hillside Properties offered a settlement that covered the cost of all necessary repairs plus additional damages. The state investigation into the fraudulent inspection and real estate practices was gaining momentum, with other victims coming forward. My story had catalyzed a community response to predatory real estate practices, creating ripples beyond my individual case. As I walked through my house that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced since moving in peace. The house was still a work in progress, with repairs ongoing and rooms half finished. But it was mine, truly mine, and I had fought for it against all odds. I had also begun standing up for myself in my family relationships, breaking generational patterns of inequality and exploitation. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. And somehow that felt like the biggest renovation project of all. The settlement money from Hillside Properties arrived just as the full extent of the foundation issues became clear. The structural engineer's report confirmed what the journal had suggested: there were significant problems that would cost nearly $20,000 to fix properly. Thanks to the settlement, I could now afford the repairs without draining my savings. While contractors worked on the foundation, I continued my own projects throughout the house. Each weekend brought new improvements, Refinished hardwood floors in the living room, updated bathroom fixtures, a fresh coat of paint in every room. What had once felt like overwhelming problems now felt like opportunities to make the house truly mine. My work as a nurse provided a welcome escape from house concerns. Caring for sick children put my own problems in perspective and reminded me of what truly mattered. One night, after a particularly difficult shift where we lost a young patient, I came home emotionally drained. As I sat on my porch swing watching the sunset, my phone rang. It was Abby. "Can I come over?" she asked. "I need to talk to you." An hour later, she was sitting beside me on the porch swing, looking more stressed than I had ever seen her. "Mom and Dad are selling the house," she said without preamble. "The business debt is worse than anyone realized. They might have to declare bankruptcy." The news hit me hard. Our childhood home, the place where, despite everything, I had many good memories. "Where will they go?" I asked. "That's part of why I'm here. They're too proud to ask, but they're wondering if they could stay with you temporarily while they figure things out." The irony wasn't lost on me. Just weeks ago, they had tried to pressure me into taking in Abby. Now they needed a place themselves. "What about you?" I asked. "I found a small apartment I can actually afford. I start a new job next week. Nothing glamorous, just retail, but it's a start." I was surprised and a little impressed by her independence. "That's great, Abby. Really." She nodded. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about taking responsibility for my choices. You've been doing that your whole life, while I've been letting Mom and Dad solve all my problems." We sat in silence for a moment, the porch swing creaking gently. "About Mom and Dad," she prompted. I sighed. "I need to think about it. This is complicated. I understand. They know they have no right to ask, especially after everything. But they're scared, Dina." After Abby left, I called Dr. Rivera for an emergency therapy session. We discussed the situation at length, exploring my mixed feelings about having my parents move in. "What are your concerns about saying yes?" she asked. "That they'll take advantage again. That they'll criticize how I live, how I've renovated the house. That they'll never leave. And what are your concerns about saying no?" I hesitated. "That I'll be perpetuating the cycle of hurt. That I'll regret not helping when they really needed it." "Those are all valid concerns," Dr. Rivera acknowledged. "What boundaries would need to be in place for you to feel comfortable saying yes?" That question guided my thinking over the next few days. I made a list of non-negotiable boundaries, a specific time frame for their stay, financial contribution to household expenses, respect for my home and decisions, and continued family therapy. If they could agree to these terms, perhaps I could help without sacrificing my well-being. Meanwhile, the neighborhood association I had helped form was gaining momentum. We met weekly to share information about predatory real estate practices and support those facing similar issues to mine. At one meeting, an elderly couple tearfully described how they had almost been scammed out of their home of 40 years. "If we hadn't seen your story on the news," the husband told me, "we might have sold for half what our home is worth." Their gratitude reminded me why I had decided to speak out. One person's stand against injustice could help many others. The news station wanted to do a follow-up story on how the community was organizing against real estate fraud. This time I agreed without hesitation. The resulting coverage brought attention from state legislators who began discussing stronger protections for homebuyers. Amid these developments, I received news that Jennifer the realtor had surrendered her license rather than face a disciplinary hearing. The home inspector was fighting the charges against him, but multiple complaints had been filed by other homeowners I had connected with through the neighborhood association. These victories strengthened my resolve to maintain boundaries with my family. When I finally met with my parents to discuss their housing situation, I brought my written list of conditions. "I'm willing to let you stay in my guest room for 3 months, I told them. "During that time, you'll contribute to utilities and groceries, respect my house rules, and attend family therapy with me and Abby. After 3 months, we'll reassess." They were surprised by my businesslike approach, but agreed to my terms. Dad seemed humbled, Mom more resistant, but both recognized they had limited options. "Thank you, Dina," Dad said quietly. "We don't deserve your help after how we've treated you." "This isn't about what you deserve," I replied. "It's about breaking the cycle of hurt in our family. But it only works if we all commit to change. They moved in the following weekend, bringing only essential belongings since they were selling most of their furniture with the house. The transition was awkward at first. Mom couldn't help criticizing my decorating choices while Dad seemed lost without his normal routines. Our first family therapy session was tense. Abby joined us, and for the first time, all four of us discussed the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. Mom broke down when she realized how her favoritism had hurt me. Dad admitted he had perpetuated the pattern he experienced in his own childhood. My parents always expected more from me than from my sister, he said, echoing what Grandma Eleanor had told me. I swore I'd be different with my children, but instead I just reversed the roles. That session was painful but clarifying. We left with a better understanding of each other and the work ahead of us. The road to healing would be long, but at least we were finally on it. As weeks passed, an unexpected development arose from the legal proceedings against the fraudulent home sale. The district attorney's office contacted me about testifying in a criminal case against Scott Turner and his accomplices. The evidence I had gathered, particularly the journal, had led to charges of wire fraud conspiracy and real estate fraud affecting multiple victims. The prospect of testifying in court was intimidating. It would mean publicly confronting the people who had tried to scam me and potentially facing aggressive cross-examination from their attorneys. It would also mean more media attention when I was trying to rebuild my life and relationships. I discussed the decision with my support network, Julia Dr. Rivera Terra, my neighborhood allies, and surprisingly my family. For the first time, my parents and Abby fully supported whatever I chose to do without pressure or guilt. You stood up for yourself with us, Abby said during a family dinner. You can definitely stand up to those scammers in court. Mom nodded in agreement. We'll be there with you if you decide to testify. Their support meant more than I expected. As I considered my options, I received another call that complicated matters further. The local news wanted to do a feature story on me, highlighting not just the real estate fraud, but my journey of standing up for myself in all areas of life. The reporter had somehow learned about my family situation and saw it as an inspirational story of personal growth and boundary setting. This would mean exposing even more of my private life and potentially embarrassing my parents publicly at a time when they were already vulnerable. The old Dina would have immediately declined to protect her family's feelings, but the new Dina needed to consider her own needs alongside theirs. As I weighed these decisions, I received a surprise visit from Grandma Eleanor, who had flown in from Florida after hearing about everything that had happened. I'm so proud of you, she said, embracing me in the doorway. You're breaking cycles that have controlled our family for generations. Her arrival felt like perfect timing. With major decisions looming about the criminal case and the feature story, I needed her wisdom more than ever. What would you do? I asked her that evening as we sat in my newly refinished garden. The area Frank Miller had falsely claimed didn't belong to me. I can't tell you what to do, she replied. But I can tell you what I wish I had done at your age. I wish I had spoken my truth, even when it was uncomfortable for others to hear. I wish I had trusted that relationships strong enough to be worth keeping could withstand honesty. Her words resonated deeply. As the sun set over my imperfect but improving home, I made my decision. I would testify in the criminal case, and I would participate in the feature story, sharing my complete journey, both the real estate fraud and the family dynamics I had begun to heal. It wasn't about revenge or public validation. It was about standing in my truth, helping others through my experience, and trusting that the relationships that mattered would survive the exposure. As Grandma Eleanor had said, it was about breaking cycles not just for myself, but for everyone my story might reach. 6 months later, I stood in my backyard garden surveying the transformation. Raised beds filled with vegetables and herbs lined the fence, and flower borders exploded with color. The garden I had dreamed about for years was finally reality, growing on land that was unquestionably mine. The criminal case against Scott Turner and his associates had concluded with guilty verdicts and restitution orders for all victims. My testimony had been pivotal, particularly the journal that documented the deliberate fraud. The experience of speaking my truth in court had been terrifying but empowering. The feature story about my journey had aired nationally, touching more lives than I could have imagined. I received hundreds of messages from people inspired to stand up for themselves, whether against real estate scams or family dysfunction. Some shared their own stories of being the family scapegoat, finding validation in my experience. Others told me how they'd been motivated to check their property documents or get second opinions on home inspections. The neighborhood association had grown into a formal community organization that advocated for stronger consumer protections in real estate transactions. I served on the board alongside Sam, Lisa, and other neighbors who had become true friends. Together, we had successfully lobbied for a county ordinance requiring more transparent disclosures in property sales. My house repairs were finally complete. The foundation was solid, the roof was new, and every room reflected my personal style and needs. What had once felt like an overwhelming project was now a source of pride and comfort. The biggest transformation, however, had occurred in my family relationships. My parents had stayed the agreed-upon 3 months, during which time they found a small condo they could afford. Our weekly family therapy sessions had continued, gradually replacing old patterns with healthier interactions. Mom had started acknowledging my accomplishments instead of taking them for granted. Dad had become more thoughtful about distributing his attention equally. Abby and I were developing a relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition and resentment. Today was the 1-year anniversary of my failed housewarming party, and I had decided to try again. This time, I had invited not just family, but friends, coworkers, and neighbors, the community that had supported me through everything. Tara arrived first, carrying a potted plant for the garden. "Can you believe it's been a year?" she asked as we hugged. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago," I admitted. "Other times like yesterday." My parents and Abby arrived next, followed by Grandma Eleanor, who had decided to relocate permanently from Florida to be closer to family. Sam and Lisa came with other neighbors. Dr. Rivera had accepted my invitation, now attending as a friend rather than my therapist, since I had graduated from regular sessions. Julia brought her husband and children. As the backyard filled with people who genuinely cared about me, I felt a sense of completion I had never experienced before. The house was full of laughter and conversation, exactly as I had imagined a year ago. My father clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, his voice carrying across the yard. "To Dina, who taught our family what real strength looks like. Not the ability to carry everyone else's burdens, but the courage to stand up for yourself and speak your truth. We're better people because of you." Tears pricked my eyes as glasses raised around the yard. My mother squeezed my hand, her own eyes moist with emotion. "And to this house," Dad continued, "which turned out to be so much more than a building. It became the catalyst for healing and growth none of us knew we needed." After the toast, I wandered through the gathering, enjoying conversations with the diverse group of people who now formed my support system. Abby pulled me aside near the rose bushes I had planted along the fence. "I wanted to show you something," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for $8,000. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "It's the money you gave up from your house fund to pay for my college tuition. I've been saving from every paycheck. It's taken me 6 months, but I finally have the full amount." I stared at the check in disbelief. "Abby, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "It's part of making amends and taking responsibility. I know it can't make up for years of imbalance, but it's a start." I hugged her, feeling a new dimension in our relationship, one based on equality and mutual respect. As evening fell, string lights illuminated the garden, casting a warm glow over the gathering. I found myself sitting on the porch steps with Grandma Eleanor, watching the celebration continue. "You've created something beautiful here," she said, gesturing not just to the house, but to the people enjoying each other's company. "Not just a home, but a community." "I couldn't have done it without you," I told her. "Your call that day was a turning point for me." She smiled. "All I did was give you permission to do what you already knew was right. The courage was always yours." "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about generational patterns," I said. "About how they continue unless someone breaks the cycle." "And you did break it," she affirmed. "I hope so. But it's ongoing work, isn't it? For all of us." She nodded. "That's the thing about foundations, whether in houses or relationships. They need regular maintenance and occasional repairs. But when they're solid, they can withstand almost anything." Her words resonated deeply as I looked around at my beautifully imperfect home and the wonderfully flawed people who filled it. A year ago, I had stood alone in an empty house, feeling abandoned and betrayed. Today, I was surrounded by genuine connection and support. The journey had been painful at times, forcing me to confront not just external challenges like fraudulent real estate practices, but internal ones like family dynamics and my own reluctance to set boundaries. Yet each difficulty had ultimately strengthened me and clarified what truly mattered. I had learned that a house becomes a home not through perfect furnishings or flawless construction, but through the authenticity of the life lived within its walls. I had discovered that family can be both born and chosen, and that healthy relationships require truth, respect, and accountability from all sides. Most importantly, I had realized that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. By valuing my own worth and refusing to accept less than I deserved, I had created space for everyone in my life to grow and heal. As the party continued around me, I felt a deep sense of peace. The house that had once seemed like a collection of problems was now truly my dream home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was mine, fought for and won against all odds. Life would continue to bring challenges both in maintaining this physical structure and in nurturing the human connections that filled it. But I now had the confidence and support to face whatever came next, standing firmly on the solid foundation I had built, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, truth by truth. Have you ever had to stand up to your family or fight for something that was rightfully yours? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings you courage for whatever battles you're facing in your own life.